Hello, and welcome to the question and answer section of ClockFuneralHome.com, your best source for answers, solutions, and guidance about anything to do with funerals. I'm Dale Clock from Clock Life Story Funeral Home, and today's question is, what does a funeral cost? This is one of the top 5 questions we get asked here at the funeral home almost every day. And I'd like to take the next couple of minutes to tell you about the different parts that make up the cost of a funeral. And then I'll give you a few examples of what the cost would be for typical types of funerals. There are 3 basic parts to the cost of any funeral plan: services, merchandise, and cash advances. The first part of these is service charges. Service charges can be broken down into 3 sections: professional services, facilities and equipment, and transportation. Professional services are the things that the funeral director and staff do for you. They include embalming and body preparation, funeral service planning, conducting the funeral service and the visitation, all the work that goes on in the office, the administration and filing, the writing of obituaries, and then the follow-up after the funeral and any filing of insurance papers. The facilities and equipment are the parts of the building and the equipment that are used when conducting the visitation and the funeral. These include the offices, visitation rooms, chapels, reception areas, the equipment used to display flowers and caskets, and audiovisual equipment like plasma screens or projectors. And then transportation. This includes the initial transfer to the funeral home from wherever the death occurred, the use of the hearse, limousines, use of a service vehicle, which is what we use to deliver flowers and run errands, and any additional mileage if we have to travel outside of our normal service area. The next basic part is merchandise. These are things that you purchase from the funeral home to use during the funeral services. They include caskets, burial vaults, life story products, printed materials, and flowers. There are quite a few selections in each one of these categories, and the selections can vary in price and in quality. In other words, there are good and better and best caskets, and the same for burial vaults, printed material, and flowers. And the choices that you make in each one of these categories will have an effect on the total cost of the funeral. But you need to remember that the items in each one of these categories do serve the same purpose. In other words, each casket does really do the same thing. So it's like any other shopping purchase that you make. The choice is up to you and your taste. The last basic part is cash advances. Cash advances are the things that the funeral home takes care of for you that we don't make any additional money on. These are pass-through items. The funeral home writes checks to pay for these things and then places those charges on the funeral bill for your convenience. These include cemetery costs, the purchase of grave spaces and the opening and closing of the grave, any equipment used at the cemetery, and the engraving on the marker. Also included are death certificates and permits, newspaper obituaries, honorariums to the minister, other clergy, musicians, or church staff, and catering charges for food for the reception, and possibly shipping charges if the death should happen to take place away from home. As you can see, there are lots of items in each of the categories, and this can make things complicated. There are lots of products, different options, and prices vary. Services and facilities can range from $2,800 to $6,500. Caskets can range from $500 to $5,000 and even more. Grave spaces and openings can vary depending on whether you live in the township where the cemetery is located or not. And newspapers can be free, or you can spend $1,000 if you choose to put an obituary in several different newspapers. This makes it hard to give a simple answer to the question, what does a funeral cost? But that being said, I'd now like to show you 3 different typical types of funeral services and what their costs are. This way you can get a general idea of how much you would have to spend. These types are 1. A direct burial, 2. A basic funeral service with same-day visitation, and 3. A standard funeral service with visitation on a separate day and a catered reception. I've divided the cost up into the 3 basic parts: services, merchandise, and cash advances, and then totaled them up for you. I've also taken the liberty to round some of the numbers to make things a little easier to remember. So if you compare these with actual costs, there is going to be a few dollars different, but that's okay. So let's go ahead. This is a direct burial. It's the least expensive and simplest type of burial service. This includes basic services of the funeral home and transportation. There is no funeral service or no public visitation, and the body is not embalmed. But the immediate family may have a private family viewing and then witness the burial. I've included an inexpensive casket and a cement grave liner and an average grave opening of $750, bringing the total to $5,000. Now, in all of the examples that I'm showing you today, I have assumed that the family already owns a grave space. So if you have to purchase a grave space, that would be in addition to the dollars you are seeing here. The next is a basic funeral service with same-day visitation. Typically, this would mean 1-hour visitation prior to the service. Included here are professional services of the funeral home and staff, all the administration, transportation, facilities, and equipment, plus embalming and preparation of the body. I've included a basic steel casket, a cement grave liner, flowers, and a standard set of register book, cards, and folders. Under the cash advances are typical newspaper obituary costs, death certificates, and an average grave opening, bringing the total to $8,200. The last example is a standard funeral service with a catered reception following and a separate day of visitation prior to the service. For example, we'd have a public visitation and a viewing on a Wednesday afternoon and evening, with the funeral service the following day, Thursday morning, followed by a catered luncheon, and then a family procession to the cemetery for a graveside service. Included are all the services of the funeral director and staff, body preparation, transportation, the use of our facilities and equipment. The merchandise in this package includes a mid-range metal or wood casket, a ceiling burial vault, the complete life story package, which includes memory folders, DVDs, life panels, and a live webcast. Under the cash advances include newspaper and online obituaries, catering for 75 people, and the grave opening, all for a total of $11,000. This gives you an idea of where typical costs fall for various types of services. Now please understand that there are variations on all of these services, and prices can vary widely depending on the individual choices of services and merchandise that you make. Now I understand that some of you will be comparing these prices with those of other funeral homes in the area, and that's great. I encourage you to do so. Here are some things to remember when you are comparing, though. Try to compare the total cost, not just individual line items of service and merchandise. At Klock Funeral Home, we place more value on the service and facilities we provide for you than on the merchandise we sell, where most other funeral homes tend to place more emphasis on selling you higher-priced merchandise. So where our service charges may be a little more than the next guy, I guarantee you that our merchandise will be much less and the total cost will be fair. So make sure you compare apples to apples and you are looking at the same services and merchandise. It's also important to set your budget when you're comparing prices. By doing this, you can make sure that you get the most for the dollars that you spent. Here's a little example. At another local funeral home, according to their price list, for $3,550, you get an 18-gauge steel ceiling casket. This is a Batesville Neapolitan blue with a light blue crepe interior. And at Klock Life Story Funeral Home, for $3,550, you can get a 20-gauge steel ceiling casket. This is a Batesville Aries blue with a light blue crepe interior, plus the use of our chapel for the funeral service and 1-hour visitation prior to the service, the complete life story package with color folders, DVD, hardcover life story book, life panel, custom cards, and more, a set of flowers which includes matching casket spray, pillow, and a family piece, and the use of the Klock Family Center, and a catered meal for $50, all for the same $3,550. So, that's what I mean when I say get the most for your dollars. You can get so much more for the same amount of money at Klock Funeral Home as you can at one of the other funeral homes. So when you're comparing, remember to compare total cost, Compare apples to apples. Make sure you're getting the same services and the same merchandise. Set your budget so you can get the most for your dollars. Well, that ends this session of questions and answers from ClockFuneralHome.com. I hope we have answered that question, what does a funeral cost? But in case you have some more questions, please feel free to contact me at Dale Clock at ClockFuneralHome.com, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can with all the answers you need. This has been ClockFuneralHome.com, the best sources for answers, solutions, and guidance about anything to do with funerals. I'm Dale Clock. Thanks for listening.